When a name like Matsuo Basho shows up in a clue hunt, it can feel almost too quiet to matter. No gold bar, no battlefield, no huge American celebrity story. Just a Japanese poet from the 1700s, a man associated with narrow roads, travel journals, weather, silence, and short poems that look almost too small to carry any real weight. But that is exactly why Basho matters. Because sometimes the strangest names in a puzzle are not there to point at a treasure. They are there to teach you how to look. Matsuo Basho was born in 1644 in Ueno, in Iga Province, Japan. He was born into a family with samurai connections, but he did not become famous as a warrior. He became famous because he turned attention itself into an art. As a young man, he entered service connected to a local lord's household, and in that world he formed an early bond with poetry. When that chapter of his life ended, he did not build a political career or chase military glory. He moved toward language, toward discipline, toward the patient act of noticing. In time, he went to Edo, the city we know now as Tokyo, and slowly built a reputation as a poet and teacher. That alone would make him interesting. But what made him unforgettable was the way he transformed a small poetic form into something vast. Today, people often think of Basho as the greatest master of haiku, the tiny poem, the little burst of image, the few syllables that somehow hold weather, loneliness, memory, and time. But Basho was not just writing small poems for decoration. He was using compression the way a jeweler uses a setting. Nothing wasted, nothing loose. Every word placed where it had to be. And that may be why a treasure book would gesture toward him at all. Because treasure hunts do not only run on facts, they run on compression. A line stands for a place. A phrase stands for a person. A symbol stands for a story. A small thing contains a larger thing. That is Basho's whole artistic universe. His pen name itself came from an image. One story says a disciple gave him a banana plant, called basho in Japanese, and the plant stood outside his hut. Over time, the plant and the hut became associated with him, and the name stayed. That matters because right there you can see the mechanism. A simple object becomes a marker. A marker becomes an identity. A natural image becomes a human one. In other words, a clue. Basho did not stay still for long. He became known not only for poems but for journeys. Around the 1680s, he began making long travels on foot, and those journeys became part of his legend. He walked roads, crossed provinces, visited old sites, temples, towns, and landscapes weighted with history. Out of that wandering came the kind of writing that made him immortal. His most famous work is usually known in English as The Narrow Road to the Deep North, though some editions call it The Narrow Road to the Interior. That title alone should make treasure hunters stop and stare. A narrow road. A path inward. A route through distance that is also a route through meaning. That is not just travel writing. That is clue writing. The book blends prose and short poems in a form later called haiku, a form Basho is widely credited with shaping. This matters because it means he was already doing something that feels deeply modern. He was mixing observation, memory, place, mood, and compressed verse into a single sequence. He was turning movement through landscape into layered meaning. If you are trying to understand why a puzzle creator would point toward Basho, start there. Because Basho understood that landscape is never just landscape. A road is not only a road. A river is not only a river. A ruined field can hold history. A season can hold loss. A name can hold a second meaning. A travel note can be literal and symbolic at the same time. That is treasure language. And Basho's life sharpened that language through discipline. He was not noisy. He was not flashy. He did not dominate by force. He built authority by clarity, by cutting away clutter, by trusting that if you place the right image in the right setting, the reader will feel the larger world around it. That may sound abstract until you think about how clue-heavy books actually work. A writer drops a person's name. Maybe most readers skim past it. But the ones who stop, who research, who sit with it, Realize that the name is not random. It carries a country, a time period, an aesthetic, a way of seeing. With Basho, the signal is not just Japan. It is travel. It is a narrow path. It is weathered observation. It is hidden depth inside simplicity. It is the idea that the real journey is not loud and straight. It is indirect, personal, interior. That is why Basho feels so different from the other names that show up in these clue webs. Someone like Coltrane brings sound, spiritual searching, improvisation, American reinvention. Basho brings stillness, restraint, precision, a traveler's eye. And yet there is a strange connection between them. Both men took a form that could seem limited from the outside and pushed it open from within. Coltrane did that with harmony and improvisation. Basho did it with the brief poem and the travel sketch. Both turned discipline into transcendence. Both made compact structures carry overwhelming feeling. Basho's journeys were not tourism. They were closer to pilgrimages. He traveled light, exposed to weather, hardship, and uncertainty. He wrote from the road in a way that made the road itself feel sacred. The places he visited were real, but they were also layered with memory, literature, and echoes from the past. In his hands, a location was never just a point on a map. It was a meeting point between the present moment and older stories. Again, for a puzzle hunter, that is gold. Because that is exactly how clue-dense books often behave. A mountain is a mountain, yes. But it is also a historical echo. A creek is a creek, yes. But it may also be a surname, a pun, a buried reference, a literary callback, or a directional hint. Basho teaches you to read place with two minds at once. One mind sees what is there. The other sees what gathers around it. He also teaches patience. Modern readers often rush. We want the answer, the pin, the coordinates, the confirmation. Basho's work slows that instinct down. He asks you to notice the season, the feeling of a road, the loneliness of a place, the way a single image changes the whole emotional weight of a scene. He makes you stay with it. And in a strange way, that can be more useful in a hunt than raw speed. Plenty of people can scan for names. Fewer can sit quietly enough to understand why a name was chosen. Basho was doing this in the Edo period, in a Japan shaped by order, class structure, and cultural refinement. Yet his work still feels startlingly alive because it is built on direct perception. Rain, dust, a road, grass, a bird call, an old battlefield, a hut. The sense that time is always folding over itself. He enriched the 17-syllable form that would later be known worldwide as haiku. But his real achievement was larger. He made smallness feel infinite. He died in 1694 in Osaka after a life marked by travel, teaching, and writing. But death did not shrink his reputation. It widened it. Over time, he became not just a famous poet, but the poet people point to when they want to explain how much can fit inside a few lines. So if you are looking at a clue book and asking why on earth this Japanese poet would be in the mix, here is the answer I keep coming back to. Because Basho is a model for reading. He tells you not to ignore the small thing. He tells you that a road may be literal and inward at the same time. He tells you that place and memory are braided together. He tells you that names can be images, and images can become identities. He tells you that the shortest line may be carrying the deepest weight. And maybe that is the real reason he belongs in a treasure conversation. Not because he points directly to a box, because he points to the method. Slow down. Travel carefully. Notice what seems too slight to matter. Read every landscape as if it has a second voice beneath the first one. Trust that compression is not emptiness. Trust that the smallest clue may be the one that opens the whole road. In that sense, Matsuo Basho may be one of the most important so-called obscure names in the entire web. Not loud enough to announce himself. Just quiet enough that most people will miss him. And maybe that is exactly the point.